G'day, Bomber fans. Yeah, this might be a short video, because you know what? I don't want to talk about this game much more. So we're not going to spend too much time on this. I should say before we start, it is really tough to grade players in a game where the whole team was just bad. So I know you want to heap the blame on individuals. You guys want to see me roast McKay. I know you do. The truth is, that I don't think any one player got a 1 or a 2 out of 10. I think pretty much the entire team, except maybe a few, got 3s or 4s out of 10. That's how I saw it play out. I don't think a few people lost us this game of footy. I think everyone was just really, really bad. So I'm going to be as harsh as I am on McKay as some others on the team as well. And yeah, let's just get into it. Let's go. Andy McGrath. And yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean, to get a 1 out or a 2 out of 10, I feel like you got to be doing everything just like, what's the opposite of perfect? Well, yeah, whatever that is. If a 9 or a 10 is perfect or close to it, then a 1 or 2 has to be just horrendous. And I don't think McGrath, I don't think McGrath was horrendous. There are a few 3s being thrown around this video, but I'm going to give McGrath a 4. I don't think he was off-putting or anything. I just thought he wasn't good enough. And yeah, I mean, he's the whipping boy. People love to hate him. And it's annoying to criticize him sometimes because the hate is so overblown and you don't want to add to it. But yeah, he just wasn't good enough against the Crows. Rankin got off the leash a few times when they were on each other. I thought he was one of the players who struggled to remain aware when guys like Keys and Dawson and Saligo were pushing high up the field on transition. And that is tough on someone in the back 6 to criticize them for that, but I thought there were times where he just didn't make the right decision. He was fine with the footy, 2 turnovers for the game, but just the 19 touches. Wasn't really getting involved enough from defence to attack, and that hurt us a bit because Shiel wasn't either. Yeah, there wasn't speed on the ball from him or anything. I think, not a lot really went right for him. He wasn't the worst of the players, but it was definitely a down game. He gets a 4, and I think, that's pretty fair, to be honest. Sam Draper, I mean, I feel like he was one of the only players who can hold their head up and say that they were actually involved in the game. He wasn't really rucking much. He was primarily a marking target inside 50 because of the lack of Langford, and he let Bryan do most of the ruck. And to his credit, I thought Draper was a really good target. He got us off the mark with an early goal, the first of the game. He turned Keane inside out to get the free kick. The set shot routine is not ideal, and I mean, he went and used that for his other 2 goals as well. We're not going to talk about that because that is one of my pet peeves, seeing players do that. Because look, we are going to talk about it. I lied. Good, look, it's all well and good when it goes through, and it's fine. We're not going to criticise him for kicking goals. But the second he starts missing, and the second it starts being a Harry McKay situation, that is where you got to say, why didn't we teach him to actually kick the footy earlier? We're not going to talk about that now, but when that starts happening, I'm going to be right on that because that really annoys me. But unfortunately, I can't be annoyed because he kicked 3 goals straight. But yeah, look, I thought he did well to get his goals. He did well to convert them. He, ideally he kicks it like a normal player, but he wouldn't be Sam Draper if he did that. I'm going to give him a 6. I feel like with a game like this, you often think, what would you rate him if the score was different? His performance isolated, 3 goals is great, but yeah, there were some really poor defensive efforts, especially when he was rucking. So I'm going to give him a 6. Hard to give a player, much higher than that on a game like this. He did get my 2 votes, by the way, so that tells you where the other ratings are going to go. Elijah Tsatas. Look, he is doing a lot right at the moment. He is getting his hands on the footy. He is getting the hard ball. He's reading the tap really well. He's winning clearances. He got 25 touches and 11 clearances. That's decent output on paper. I'm sure many were happy with what they saw, but I just saw too many mistakes creeping in. There was such a clear lack of composure when he had the footy. 25 touches, but he was going at over 40% by foot. So, do you really want him to get those touches? He had 7 turnovers, just 3 score involvements. He really wasn't doing any damage at all with the footy he was winning. I liked his attack on the ball. I haven't given him a fail because I thought he was trying. But yeah, I just cannot justify more than a 5. I get that he's winning the footy. I understand that parts of his game are working, but he is far from a rounded midfielder right now. He needs to brush up his ball use, because right now he's getting a lot of the footy and just doing nothing with it. So yeah, I'm going to give him a 5. It should also be noted, yet again, he didn't play much of the game. Only the 2 players that were subbed on and off played less footy than Tsatas. So, I don't think that's a fitness thing. I think it's partly the fact that we're developing him pretty early into his career and trying not to destroy his body, and also the fact that I don't think he's really anything other than an inside midfielder. And that's we drafted him to be an inside midfielder. We really need him to be a good one. I'm not saying he should be right now because he's so young still. But yeah, there is not a lot to his game outside of what he does in the midfield. So we're going to see how that goes. Still a bit of developing to go. I'm going to give him a 5 because I actually thought he was all right. And he was good in some areas, bad in others. Jye Caldwell, I thought he was decent. He was one of the guys giving it a red-hot crack all game. A lot of his work was on the back foot, so he had 27 touches, but 2/3 of them came in the defensive half of the field. He had just 3 inside 50s for the game, and only 2 clearances. Last week he had 11 clearances, this week he has 2, and, it's that difference. I think those were probably, you'd have Tsatas winning those 11 clearances, not a lot happening with his entries. Caldwell winning just the 2, whereas last week when he had 11, he was doing serious damage with the footy, so, yeah. But anyway, back to Caldwell. He was just, in the guts and around it. He was fine. He gave it a crack. He wasn't really providing that spark like he was last week, but he was one of our better players. I think he didn't disgrace himself like many of the other players. He wasn't the reason for the loss at all, but he wasn't playing great footy. So for me, great, good or great footy is a 7. I thought Caldwell was fine. He gets a 6. He just went about his business and played as his usual standard with some defensive lapses in there. I've seen some footage of some of the work Caldwell was doing tracking players, which is probably why I haven't given him the 7. There were a few others like that as well. But yeah, Caldwell was part of that problem. Now I'm thinking, do I give him a 5? No, I'm going to give him a 6 because I thought with the ball he was okay. Zach Merrett. Look, you would want to give him a 10. You really would. Can you give a player a 10 when the team was that bad? And I understand that Merrett was pretty phenomenal with some of his acts, but there were also, I've seen a lot of the vision. Merrett was, a part of it once or twice too. Like, I think in a team performance like that, you cannot say that someone was perfect because so clearly everything was going wrong for us. And as brilliant as Merrett was playing, he was also, part of that midfield that was letting the Crows go crazy. So, I'm still giving him a 9. I thought he was brilliant. 748 metres gained, 36 disposals, 4 goals. now I'm wondering if I've made myself look silly by giving him a 9 because that is just a 10 performance. But I hope you can understand where I'm coming from because I thought, every player did something wrong at one stage. Maybe in a win he'd get a 10 for a game like that. I'm very sorry, Zach. That you just feel like that game does deserve a 10, but I'm giving him a 9. I'm sorry. All right, here is where we start to get harsh. And be nice, guys. Look, Ben Hobbs. He is not a forward. He is a midfielder being played out of position. He's resting in the forward line and dragging his defender out to appear at stoppages every now and then. But that isn't really the style of player that suits him, I think. So I understand that it is really hard for him, but we do have to be real and just grade him on performance. And I thought he was probably one of the poorest players against the Crows. Last week, he wasn't finding the ball, but he was at least laying, good pressure inside 50. He had 7 tackles. I think he had 4 or 5 tackles inside 50 or something for the game. It was good, sustained pressure. Against Adelaide, he had 1 tackle for the entire match. So not only, he had the 14 disposals, mostly uncontested, and he went at about 30% by foot, 70 metres gained. So that is not great at all. It's very bad. And that was kind of on track with where he was performing last week, where I gave him a 5. But this week, he doesn't have that pressure aspect of his game either. So really, it's a 3. There wasn't really an area of his game or a part of his game that made you say, that is what Hobbs is in the team for. I was never thinking that at all. I just think he is currently a name on the sheet, and we don't know where to play him. We put him in the position that I guess works best for him without completely destroying the team in the midfield. Because I don't know. I think he's good enough to contend in the midfield, but I don't think he's good enough to be in there over certain players, and you can't really justify putting him in centre bounces if he shouldn't be there. But also he's too good to be out of the team. It's such an awkward spot for Hobbs. I'm giving him a 3 because I just think he's not playing well in this role. I'm going to talk a bit now as well about dropping players after a game like that, because I'm seeing lots of comments about calling for McKay or McGrath to be dropped. And I mean, that's fair if it's your opinion. But I think dropping a senior player like McKay, like McGrath, and putting in Angus Clark or Lewis Hayes instead of them would completely not only destroy the team, but destroy the confidence of whatever player making their debut. Because McGrath and McKay and players like that are not the issue, them playing in their position there. The whole team is the issue. But when it's someone like Ben Hobbs, who is, again, not the issue, he's just part of it, like McGrath and McKay. But when he's playing out of position and not really developing in this role or even really showing signs of helping the team, that is where I think, that's a player we can replace. I don't think we should replace McKay. I don't think we should replace McGrath, even though they're playing really bad footy at the moment. But Ben Hobbs, I think he is 100% replaceable because not only would bringing him into the VFL maybe give him some confidence and play him in his preferred position and, help him develop his craft there, especially under Todd Goldstein, who's a very good ruck and he's played with some great midfielders. So not only would it do that, but it would bring in someone that can actually play in the forward line. Someone like, I don't know, I was going to say Archer Daywicks, but that's probably going early. You know what I mean, though? Someone young who, we can get a game into. Sardell Hawley, I think he could play the role that Hobbs is playing. I think I would like to see Hobbs dropped from the team, not because I don't like him as a player, but because the role he's playing now is one that just doesn't suit him at all. Moving on. Dylan Shiel, he gets a 3. I don't know if this role is going to work. I'm happy to persist with it for another week or two because it has been 2 games. But yeah, he just goes into a shell a bit and he kind of follows the flow of the game. So I feel like when you look at great rebound defenders, I remember Adam Sard, Nick Blakey's another one. There are plenty around. The thing they can do is they can dictate the flow of the game through their own performance and their own dash and dare. And I feel like Dylan Shiel is constantly having the game dictated by the opposition. So yes, he had 21 touches, but 10% of those came in the forward half of the field. We need Shiel progressing the ball forward through run and overlap, like with Carl Amon last week, players like that. But right now, he is just another defender in the back 6, playing deep in D50. So not only is he not doing what we need him to do, but he's being forced to defend far too often. And he should not be getting 13 hand passes and 8 kicks a game. He should be using the ball by foot, getting it far up the field. And some will say part of that is the fact that the Crows' pressure is just too much. But Wanganeen-Millera showed last week that you can get separation and movement if you work hard and smart. And the Saints lost that game by the same amount that we did. So, yeah, Shield just wasn't working smart enough for me. I thought he worked hard, but he just doesn't have the brain of a player that should be playing this role right now. I honestly thought we missed Nic Martin a bit back there. But yeah, we can't be playing Nic Martin. I don't know, it's tough. I think we persist with Shield for another week or two. I think those calling for Angus Clark, again, that is just... It is throwing a player really far in the deep end there. I think another week or two of Dylan Shiel. Sorry, guys, that don't want to hear that. And if I didn't say his rating, he gets a 3. Isaac Kako. Yeah, look, I thought he gave it a crack. He applied some good heat at times. He was dangerous on ground level. Even when things didn't go right for him, he was still around the mark. And he had some moments where he could have scored or something, but ended up with someone else doing the work. There was that drop mark, uncontested mark that ended up being a goal for Gresham, I think, or someone. In the end, just 9 touches, but I thought he gave it a crack and provided us with more footage for the highlight reel. Like I said last week, these games where he isn't lighting it up are actually promising because it's showing that even when he isn't having a huge impact and even when the team is having a howler, he is still around the mark and looking like an AFL player. I actually thought he was our best small forward, not our best forward, but our best small forward. He was better than Gresham, better than anyone really. He's already the number 1 small forward in our team and he's 2 games in. So yeah, I think with a lot of pressure to perform on all the young players, I thought Kako is one that you cannot really criticise at all for what he did. So I'm giving him a 6. I thought he was fine. 3 goals in 2 games, that's a good start to his career. I'm liking what we're seeing so far from Kako. His partner in crime, Jade Gresham. Look, I loved him last week. I thought he was great as the sub and really opened up the game. But I don't know, that just wasn't there yesterday, and maybe it's playing a better drilled, or it's not even a better drilled system really, because we played Hawthorn last week. Maybe it's just how poor, I don't know. He wasn't involved. With some straight kicking, he could have got more out of his game. 1 goal, 2 behinds, 5 involvements. maybe we give him a higher grade if those go through, or if he, one or two of those touches turns into something else. And maybe that's all it takes, getting from a 4 to a 5, because he's a really clever player. He can make things happen, but I just feel like he wasn't doing enough. I also thought, unfortunately for him in his role, he was a bit of a tone setter as well, because the Crows had so much heat around the ball early and we didn't match it. And his sub energy last week, that could have been huge early for us this week, but unfortunately he just, he had the one touch at quarter time. I forgot he was playing. He was missing a bit when it mattered this week, whereas last week he was impacting when it mattered, and that's the difference between, I guess, Gresham playing good footy and Gresham playing not so good footy. So he gets a 4. We really could have used a creative ball user like him early in the game, and we just didn't have that. Archie Perkins, I'm still tossing up between a 3 and a 4. I actually don't have one of them written in my notes. Usually I have one, and I just go with that and change it, but for Perkins I've written 3 or 4, so I'm deciding on the spot. I mean, again, he got off to a slow start, one touch at quarter time. That cannot keep happening. That shouldn't be happening with a player like this, because, we see him at his best. We need him across all 4 quarters, because when he's involved, good things are happening. And we saw that last week. He was doing nothing up until half time, and I gave him an 8 for the game. This week, when it mattered, he was just not there, like with Gresham, really, like with many players. Perkins got 12 of his 19 touches after half-time when the game was already lost. I thought his first half was really ordinary. He looked one of the biggest passengers. You know what, I was leaning towards a 4 when I saw 19 disposals, just because I remember that second half. But for me, not doing enough in that first half was... That lost us the game. Not Perkins himself, but the team. Credit for him lifting as the game went on. Yes, well done, but too little too late. I'm giving him a 3. I think we and with Perkins doing it 2 weeks, back to back, it's getting a bit worrying. So we need to see him start games well now, because, right now he's making a very good case for being that impact sub, because so far he hasn't really done anything in the first half of a game of footy in 2025. But no, I back him in. I think we're seeing a lot from him this year already. Both good and bad, but the good is enough for me to back him into, he's not getting dropped anytime soon for me. Archie Perkins, I thought he gave it a crack. You know what? Yeah, he did give it a crack. I feel like you can always trust him to get in. And I feel like after the match, I was thinking, Roberts was one of the ones who looked good. He could get a 6 or a 7. He was around the footy the fair bit. But then I remember, I remember that first half again, and where, same with Gresham and Perkins, but where was he then? Because, this is really harsh on Roberts. This is has he even played 10 games yet? I don't know, but yeah, he had 12 disposals in the fourth. Most of them were just around D50, floating around, 7 rebound 50s. That's not bad for 19 disposals. That's 1 rebound every 3 touches. So, I mean, he's getting trusted being that exit kick, but also we didn't really get much through him. I thought he was okay. I'm not going to give him a 4. I thought he was far from the issue in defence. He was a defender, so I'm not giving him a high grade, because we saw what happened to pretty much everyone in the defensive half of the field at some stage in that game. It's hard to judge him off the fourth, because by that stage, the foot's off the gas for the Crows and both teams. The first 3 quarters were pretty average, so I'll give him a 5. Samuel Durham, I thought he was okay. I thought he was one of our better players. I thought he can hold his head high. Yeah, I liked him around the footy. It would have been good to have another Sam Durham in a game like this, because you can play him, one in the midfield and one up forward, because I feel like we were missing him in both parts of the ground. Because, his attack on the footy was decent. He was one of the players who didn't disgrace himself with effort. I wasn't paying too much attention to his work in transition and how he defended the Crows midfielders running forward. So if he was a big fault of that, I rescind my rating, because that really bothered me, a lot of that. And let me know down below if I've made any mistakes there with all of these. But yeah, I thought what I saw from Durham was good enough to give him a pass. He isn't quite getting to that level many hoped he would be at, but after a team performance like that, you can't complain too much with what he dished up. I thought he was far from the issue. He gets a 6. Harry Jones, he was one of the more frustrating players on the day, because he was so helpful last week. He was the role player for you guys, so the community voted him in as the role player of the match last week. He was playing good footy. I really like what he gave us on the wing last week and resting forward too. But this week, he was, I don't know, he was just nowhere. And he was playing primarily wing, I think, as well, so he should have been around the footy more. But yeah, he just wasn't. And this week, we really needed some control in the air at times, because the Crows had everything going in the air. We needed more out of a taller target, and in the end, he had just 2 marks, 9 disposals. He had virtually no impact on the game. I feel like his tackling pressure was at least decent. He had the 6 for the game. He brought some players to ground at important moments. I remember 1 or 2. And when one of your taller players is leading the team's tackle count, you know something is wrong. So he had 6 for the game. The next best for us had 4. But yeah, I'm going to give him a 3, just because there was nothing coming out of him at all with the footy. The story, it was the story of the day bit with many of these players. He was just a floater, unfortunately for us. And that sounds very harsh, but that's because I have very high expectations for Jones. Nic Bryan probably won the ruck contest against O'Brien, or evened it out. It was pretty close. I don't think he won it, but O'Brien didn't have heaps of an impact, so I guess that's a win. Neither did Bryan. I'm going to call, by the way, because I've just realised that their names are O'Brien and Bryan. I'm going to call O'Brien Riley to avoid confusion. So Riley had the 32 hitouts, the 10 touches, not much around the ground. Nic had 23 hitouts, 14 disposals, 12 of them kicks, and 5 clearances. On paper, that's fine. Now, those clearances also, they didn't really result in anything that great of value, but he was at least winning the footy. So, yeah, that's a win. And to be honest, when I was watching, I was thinking that Bryan was one of the players who just wasn't giving us enough around the ground. There were a few pretty poor defensive efforts, and maybe it's a bit unfair to be, talking about a ruckman, catch ruckman sleeping and not others, because it is hard for them to, especially them, such an important player, to be, running back with the halfbacks from Adelaide. But there were a few times where it was Bryan caught out of position a bit and looking a bit lost. So even though I thought his ruck craft was decent, he was shutting down O'Brien. I thought he wasn't at his best, so he gets a 5. Jaxon Prior. So this is probably the one that people want to hear about the most, because I really like Prior. I think he can add value to the team, and so far he's looked pretty shocking. He followed up a really poor game last week with another one this week. Now, I do think he is not alone in that, 100%, but he's quickly become a pretty popular or unpopular player. And I mean, fair enough, new recruit joins the club and doesn't perform straight away. It is fair to want change. I think before we start, getting into his game, we got to say the back 6 is bloody under the pump from the midfield. The way we defended the ground against Adelaide, no defender was going to have a good game. No defender was going to get a pass. Now, that is not me creating excuses for Prior. He has a 4 next to his name for a reason. But it is me saying that for those wanting Angus Clark to come in for Jaxon Prior, like I said with these other guys, I just don't know if that is the right play for a young, developing lad. Throwing him into a chaotic and lost system. I understand the frustration with Prior. I am probably more frustrated than anyone because I have advocated for him a bit, and I do genuinely think he could be a decent player. Unfortunately, I've got to know him at Brisbane in a good system where he looked good there, and in the VFL too, they had a good system. But here, he has just not been able to get going at all. He looked good in the practice match, but then when push came to shove, when it came to the actual season, he has just not been good enough at all. I thought he lifted a bit this week compared to last week, at least defensively. He didn't lose a one-on-one contest. He was intercepting in the air a bit more, a few intercept marks, a couple contested. I thought in the air he was far from the problem, but he really struggled to keep up with the smaller forwards and midfielders during handover. And that to me is not as glaring as a performance as last week with him. I think last week we can chalk it down to Prior having a mare. This week, it's 50% lack of defensive awareness from Prior and 50% just a complete breakdown in our zone in front of him and him having to scramble back with every other defender as well. I kind of overstate how much our back 6 was put under the pump. It's so easy to give only them bad scores because we conceded 161, but to say that the defenders are the issue is completely missing the point. I thought you can't solely blame Prior, but also he was no good. You can't say that was a good game. So yeah, even though his stats look reasonable defensively, I wouldn't go as far as to say he was any good. He was pretty poor again, but I think those calling for him to be dropped really don't understand the actual problem with our defense. It is, I'm going to give Prior a 4. I thought he held his own compared to others, but it was really not good enough, at all. He needs to have a good game soon, because I am stressing. Mason Redman, this is probably the one defender from the game that I think actually played his part or tried to. So He had the task of running with Tex Walker for most of the game, a player a fair bit taller than him, and Tex did have an impact on the game. But I thought Redman didn't completely disgrace himself. So Tex had 10 kicks, a goal. He was involved in a lot of scores as well. He was doing a fair amount with what he had. But I mean, so was every other Adelaide player. I thought the impact of Tex was smaller than the impact of Thilthorpe or Fogarty. So, and Redman had a tougher task having to play on those guys. And also, he was probably one of the more consistent defenders and not allowing Tex to actually get dangerous looks inside 50. And that is good for an undersized defender playing on someone he shouldn't be. So yeah, I just feel like he was having a crack, and maybe you guys will see it differently, but I saw effort and intent from Redman. It didn't amount to anything, but part of that is because 20 players around him weren't buying into it. So I'm actually going to give Redman a pass. I've got 6 written down. Do I give him a 5 or a 6? While I decide, I'm going to open my Dare Mocha, my Dare Iced Coffee Mocha. That's the choice of drink today. I'm going to give Redman, I don't know. I'm going to give Redman a 5. Oh, a 6. I'm being too negative this video. Redman was alright. While we wait, because I'm going to have a quick sip, tell me what you thought of the maths episode last night. I see you guys want me to keep talking about it more. I don't think I should, but I'll bring it up once a video for you wanting to hear about maths. By the way, something I do with my iced coffee is I put it in the freezer for about, I don't know, half an hour. And it's kind of like a little iced coffee slushy. So there's a little life hack for you. Xavier Duursma. Now, by the way, so last week I finished talking about Redman, and then I completely skipped Duursma, I think, because I was having a drink. So that is, I didn't. This week I remember Xavier Duursma. Both our wingers got torched a bit, so if I'm going to be harsh on Jones, I have to be harsh on Duursma. Jones was poor on one side. Duursma was almost just as poor on the other. He really didn't get much done. And it was annoying because he was really good last week. He was one of our best, and then he just goes missing. He's definitely someone who can play good games with limited footy. Even last week, I don't think he had 20 touches, but I mean, this week, 13, 6 kicks, just the 4 involvements. There's just not enough happening there. He didn't really do a lot. I thought he was someone who could have really helped us out in defence as well, more than he did at least. I reckon early he was involved. I feel like he had a good start to the game. I feel like I was saying good job, Xavier, quite a bit. But by the end, he was one of those players who you just forgot that was on the field. And that's surprising because I'm a big fan of Duursma. I really rate him a lot. I think he's genuinely one of our most important players. But yeah, he wasn't good enough. And I don't think he... You know what? I'll give him a 3. I expect more from Duursma. I think he should be doing more than he did. God, lots of 3s and 4s gone around. Jye Menzie. Now, look, you guys are going to be annoyed at me. I cannot give him anything lower than a 5. He played 1 quarter of footy. He was involved a bit. And I feel like it's when a sub comes on before it's announced and you notice them there, and like around the footy, and they just kind of blend into the game and how it's being played. Or I guess that's not a good thing, but they blend into the game. That's when it's a good sub performance, or not a good sub performance, but they're not playing badly. And I thought Menzie, 3 disposals, 3 score involvements, everything he did turned out to be a score. You can't really fault his effort as much as the other boys, because he's coming on at 3/4 time, or whenever he did, coming on the ground late to a game that's completely, it's a mess out there. He's coming onto a crime scene, having to really just do something. And to be fair, I think he did. So he gets a 5. I don't think he did nothing. I get why you want to rate him a 3, because everyone hates Menzie, but I'm not going to. Nate Caddy from the sub to the subbed. Maybe it was the Corky, but I don't think Caddy had an impact at all. Unfortunately, he is the main target in a forward line that is so new and so young. He has to take the best defenders each week. I think Nic Martin was the one that was on him for most of the game, and he was wearing him pretty well. And last week, I thought Caddy got out well and contested well, and actually got the better of Tom Barras a few times. He had 4 contested marks. That's really good for a player this age. I gave him a 6. I thought he had a good game last week, even though he didn't kick a goal. I don't think we can measure Caddy by goals. We can measure him by effort and just... How can you measure Caddy? It's tough with players like this. I'm going to give him a low score because he didn't play well, but I expect him to have games like this. I don't think this is alarming at all. I think young key forwards in their second year, he's played just over 10 games, they're bound to have games this bad. This is nothing. It's nothing about Caddy's performance surprised me on Saturday. Yes, he was very poor. I'm giving him a 3, but no alarm bells whatsoever. I think that is completely natural in a young key forward's lifespan. It happens. I could find you every single key forward in the history of the competition, I reckon, and find them a game like this. Maybe, I don't know what happened past the 90s or 80s, but in the modern game, this is just how it happens. You know, he had a bad game. Yeah, he had a bad game, all right? Zach Reid, all right, 3 City. Another 3 for Zach Reid. I was tossing up with the dreaded 2, but yeah, I feel like to get to a rating that low, you have to be the main problem yourself. And Reid, you know, the fact that people are calling out other players ahead of Reid, that maybe suggests that he wasn't the main problem. He was just a massive part of it, a big part of it. As we say, it's good to see him get out and play footy. That is really important. Him being out on the park is good. But for the first time in a while, I thought that maybe we should be playing a new structure and play someone, you know, instead of Reid. And that's not a criticism to Reid at all, because I actually think he had a horrible mismatch. He had to play on Darcy Fogarty, who is, you know, about a good 10 centimeters smaller than him. He is more mobile. He is so much stronger. I thought Reid was thrown into the deep end entirely. And as I talked about with Ben Hobbs, maybe that's a sign that we should be playing him in the VFL. So we have Ben McKay and Zach Reid, both well over 2 meters tall, running into each other because they're both such similar styles of players. And just not really having an impact while the other one's there. I thought Ben McKay was fantastic last year, you know, as that role that he should be playing now. But unfortunately, when you have, and I know people will say he wasn't fantastic, I mean the first half of the year. But yeah, I mean, when you've got 2 of these really tall players playing on a forward line where you don't really need height, that is where you think, maybe should we bring in someone else, like, you know, even a few centimeters smaller, like Lewis Hayes. I don't know. I think Zach Reid is almost being played out of position right now, and that is really affecting his game, and that is not what you want with a young defender. Maybe what he needs is to, you know, the next time I think we've got Port on the weekend who don't have a tall forward line, play him in the VFL, bring Lewis Hayes in. Hey, do something. Because right now he's not having fun out there, and we're not having fun watching him either. Speaking of not having fun, Ben McKay. So he gets a 3. It was annoying because I thought he was alright early. He was one of the first players in the game to assert themselves in early contests, and he took a few contested marks and intercept marks. He wasn't beaten in a proper one-on-one all day either. But as the game went on, Thilthorpe did get off the leash a bit, and then on the flip side, McKay wasn't attacking in the air anymore. Right now, we don't have an intercept defender, and people say McKay isn't that player, that big intercepting marker. He is. He has been for years. He's been one of the best in the comp at taking the ball in the air. But this year, something's just not right with his game at all, and maybe it is the fact that he's playing with Reid. They were bumping into each other a fair bit. But even his bad games last year, he was still intercepting heaps. He was just doing weird stuff. He was just doing weird stuff with the footy. I feel like there was he had like 12 intercepts one game and was just giving it right back to the other team. Even in bad games last year, he was having an impact in the air and intercepting. This year, he just isn't. I don't know what it is. I really don't. You could say maybe it's the preseason, the lack of it, but he is one of the best runners on the ground. He covered the 5th most distance for the game. He played out 100% of it, so he's fit. But is there? I don't know. Is there just a lack of confidence, like a complete? I don't know. He needs a big game. He really needs a big response game because he is so much better than what he's dished up early this year. I know people will say he isn't, and people will say they're right in you know, not wanting him at the club, but he has played some really good footy for us already in his short career with us. He is so much better than what he's dished up in these first 2 games. I don't know. We really need something out of him soon because at the moment it's looking very dire. If there's another bad McKay game coming up, the fan base is going to absolutely, that's going to be ugly. That is going to be ugly. And I think from there, how would you even respond after 3, you know, really horrendous games to start the year? That is, we need him to come good soon because the more he plays like this, the worse it's going to get. Nic Martin, we're almost done, guys. Nic Martin, There seemed to be a little, I don't know, directed from Adelaide to stem his influence a bit, maybe. I feel like there was some pretty heavy attention to him at times, and maybe that's why he was thrown to the back half a bit more to get us moving, because most of his footy did actually come in the back half, 60% in defence. But despite that, he still topped our score involvements with Merrett, so he was still doing plenty. He had 9 from his 20 touches, and that's the Martin impact right there. This is a player who doesn't need 30 or 40 off halfback to have a good game. Sometimes it's just 20 and a goal. He was setting up a lot for us on the day. Probably one of our only decent players, really, with ball in hand. Defensively, there's some footage that I don't like, so I'm not going to give him a good score. But I thought with ball in hand, he was decent, and he worked hard for most of the day. He covered the second most distance of anyone on the ground, so you can't say he wasn't trying. But yeah. And he didn't float in and out of the game too like others. He was pretty consistent all day. I thought he was one of our better players, so I'm going to give him a 6. And finally, well not finally actually, because this week I'm going to include the coach. Many of you have asked for that, and I'm doing that. And Tom Edwards. Tough day for Tom Edwards. Going down by 61 points in your first game. But you know what? I thought he was one of the better players. For starters, he was a target, and I did actually rate the way that he went about it, because a few times, he made mistakes, but then he went hard for those second efforts, and I think that's actually how he kicked his first goal. He dropped a horrible chest mark and then applied some pressure, which helped force a turnover, and then he got himself a mark in space inside 50, and things like that. He just pops up in the right areas. He is clearly a very intelligent forward. He's got great goal sense. It's tough for a player to come to a club and understand what the system entails and what they should be doing. He's done that in a month. He looked well at home. He kicked 3 goals. He was influencing the game. I gave him a vote yesterday, and I'm going to give him a 7, even though Draper got a 6, just because it's his first game. This is his debut, and he was looking more at home and at times more passionate than some of the players on the list. That have been there for a while. And yeah, Brad Scott. So the coach, look, to cut him some slack, there are injuries, the list we have is not ideal. As I said a few times before the game, Adelaide were the much better team on paper, so he did have his back against the wall, but you would hope that change would be made to stem their flow at some stage, because I feel like we had one plan to win the game, and it revolved around our midfield, and when that didn't work, we didn't know what else to do, and we just kept trying the same thing, and it played into Adelaide's hands. I think there were opportunities to change the flow of the game and change the style, not even to suit us, but to stop Adelaide in their momentum. We should have done something to slow this game down. I don't care if it's boring footy. I don't care if it is, kicking the ball around in D50 for a minute or two just to stop the momentum. We needed to do something. And in the end, we did nothing, and we were completely embarrassed. I get why we're playing certain players as well. We want Hobbs and Reid to be developing, to be playing footy. But again, I wonder if we're doing them favours playing them out of position or in mismatches. So, I don't know. I feel like the game definitely wasn't lost at selection. I don't disagree with any of the calls he made. But now I am starting to think maybe we need to see certain players play in the VFL. And that's not a bad thing. That brings other young players into the team as well. I think it's important that we do rotate and also prove that no one's safe, because not many people would have thought that Zach Reid would be dropped early into the year, but I think that just tells him that he needs to do a lot of work, because right now he's just kind of playing because he can, and I think Lewis Hayes deserves to play more than Zach Reid, and that's not me criticising Zach Reid's performance. I think he's playing out of position, but what Lewis Hayes is doing, deserves something. Yeah, I think there's ways for him to rectify some of the mistakes he's made recently, Brad Scott. I think he's got a huge opportunity to prove against Port that, we can do the outclassing, because I think Port are a team that can be outclassed a bit in the coach's box. But as for, this performance, I think he was completely, destroyed by Matthew Nicks. I thought the Crows just had the game in their control for the entirety of it. And I also didn't like the way he responded in the coach's box in the press conference after. I thought he was, sometimes we want to hear, Brad Scott actually give us something. And I feel like he just, he turns into a grumpy man when asked hard questions. So I'm going to give him a 2. Yeah, I thought it really wasn't good enough from our players or our coaches. But yeah, I'm giving Brad Scott a 2. And that is that. That is a pretty negative video. Hopefully we don't have any more like this where I'm just, criticising for however long it's been. Not a big fan of doing that. I'm a glass half full kind of guy. So yeah, player ratings where half the list fails is not ideal. Cheers for watching, everybody. Remember, this is just my opinion. It is tough to keep track of 23 different players, especially in a game like this one. So let me know what you think down below if I've got anything wrong. Don't be a poo bum. Be nice in the comments. Cheers for watching. Like, subscribe, and go Bombers.